Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel. This is my little weekly wrap-up. I'm still relatively new to doing them, so please do bear with for technical interruptions. No, I mean more for me not really knowing how to make this work, but let's see. But I wanted to talk about some of the books I'd read this week, and again, this might look like a large-ish number, but a lot of them are very short, as you might sort of see from just sort of like a very brief little bit here. A fair few that are sort of around 100, 150 pages, which are quite nice and short. Anyway, let's go through some of them. And it was a really fun reading week, especially as my brain was a little bit fried at various parts of this week. So actually having some nice sort of short books was a really blessing, a real blessing. I cannot do English anymore. Go me. Anyway. Let's start this off. So the first was a book that, has sort of had quite a lot of buzz around it recently. It had a bit of a relaunch, and that is the book They by Kay Dick. So this is sort of a bit of a mysterious book in some ways. It's sort of a bit of a dystopian thing. It's basically the idea of a sort of authoritarian group moving in, or something along those lines, that kind of is sort of shutting down things like culture and TV and whatever else. And so this has sort of been reissued after a really long time, and the sort of story goes that this was sort of rediscovered in like a secondhand bookshop somewhere by somebody who works for a publisher, and sort of they were like, no wait, this is really good, let's make this happen. And it's an interesting one. I read it as part of a book club, and I think most of us were sort of like, there are some really good bits about this. I'm just quite surprised, I think, after a lot of the hype around it, because I feel like a lot of the hype was talking about this being like a really radical kind of reimagining of lots of things, that it's really prescient for our times, that it's very queer, and all of these other things. And I'm not sure if I really see that. There are I suppose the topic of alienation generally and sort of othering is necessarily fairly queer, but apart from that, I don't really know. And so for me, I found myself wanting a little bit more sort of by the end of this book, because it sort of just happens. It's quite lilting, it's quite pastoral, and then it sort of ends, and you're like, okay. So I don't know, I feel like I've missed this. It's short enough that I could reread it to kind of see what I maybe missed, but at the same time, without sounding harsh, I'm not really in any hurry to do so. And I don't think it's a bad book necessarily. I also just think that a lot of the promotion around it has been quite a weird mis-selling. I was expecting a sort of queer panopticon kind of thing, and it was sort of just like a pastoral countryside sort of slow horror, I guess. Something along those lines, but there we go. Another teeny tiny little book, Claire Keegan's Foster, which again is about just under 100 pages. And Claire Keegan, I really loved her book Small Things Like These, which came out last year. It was one of my top books of the year. And Foster is, in many ways, sort of touches similar-ish ground, but it is about a foster family, as you can maybe expect. And it has a lot of that same charm that Small Things Like These has, of lots of passages where incredible amounts of detail are described in very few words, and this book exists sort of in the silences between characters, and so it's really interesting to see little bits between people and how those all thread together to make what's actually going on. I thought this was beautiful. It was really haunting. The story sort of takes you through this experience of this young girl and how it works alongside the family, and it's just so alive in terms of its language and everything, and I just thought it was really, really beautiful. So yeah, I really enjoyed having this one. Next up, two books by the same author, both by Justin David. So Kissing the Lizard and The Pharmacist. So The Pharmacist came out first, but Kissing the Lizard is a sort of prequel to it. Kissing the Lizard is sort of after. No, it is before. I'm getting myself confused now. But Justin David is sort of one of the founders as well of Incandescent, who are a queer press, and a small sort of independent press. They run quite a lot of events that I've been going to, or been trying to get involved with recently as well, which is very exciting, including a poetry evening that I went to recently. And I'm due to be doing an interview with Justin soon about Kissing the Lizard, which is due to come out fairly soon. And so I am really, really intrigued to just see how, to really kind of get into the meat and bones of the discussions around these books, because I found them both so beautiful. The dialogue is really snappy and like so well captured. It's so well observed how people actually talk to each other. I'm terrible at writing dialogue in my own writing, so I whenever I see really good dialogue, I'm like, ooh, tell me all of your secrets. I probably will spend most of the interview just trying to steal Justin's secrets. But they both sort of concern a queer character's life, and particularly the sort of coming of age aspect of it. And so in Kissing the Lizard, we get this sort of sense of leaving home, trying to find out your identity, trying to work out who you are. This bit of paper is a lovely little note that Justin sent when he sent over the book. And in The Pharmacist, we sort of have what it looks like to be a sort of queer person on the scene, suddenly surrounded by drugs, suddenly surrounded by so many other things that, you know, might give you some temporary reprieve from the fear of everything that's going on around you, or the kind of the feeling of not belonging. And so I just thought these were so beautiful. Very short kind of books together, probably about 250 pages total for the two of these. But I found them just so beautiful, and was sort of messaged Justin at one point because I was like, well, I've been reading this, and like The Pharmacist, I was on a train reading a particularly sort of, well, like a fairly graphic sex scene, and sort of suddenly realised, like, how many people on this train are looking over my shoulder? Because if they are, I mean, hopefully it's improved their commute. You know, I mean, anything to improve a London commute, really. But really beautiful, gorgeous books. Kissing the Lizard is due to come out fairly soon. I keep on shuffling these like little cards, like woo. But Kissing the Lizard is due to come out fairly soon, and that's sort of part of why I'm doing a little interview with Justin to sort of kind of help launch some of this as well. So really exciting, and I do urge you to go and check them out. Really fun. Like I said, really beautiful dialogue, really beautiful understanding of kind of what a queer life is a lot of the time, and how kind of queer characters, you know, queer people sort of generally have that feeling of never quite belonging, or that feeling of something never quite being right and having to prove something extra. And I think it's so beautifully captured in these two books. So I highly urge you to check them out. Next up, and after about a year of like telling myself I was going to read this, I mean, I say that probably about a month or two, but Ursula K. Le Guin's The Lefthanded Darkness, which Larry Has Opinions did a wonderful review of earlier, and has sort of been pushing for me to read finally for a really long time. And I also sort of did a buddy read of this with Gem of Books, who didn't get on with it, and I understand some of those reasons behind it. So this sort of largely is a book, sort of sci-fi fantasy book that sort of deals with sort of a planet, or a sort of set of people who, I'm now getting suddenly loads of sunshine from over there again. Woo! I might just sort of use Ursula K. Le Guin as a little sun shield there. There we go. But this book deals with the idea of this sort of group of people. Okay, this sun's really strong. Now you choose. Like, it's literally been like miserable all day. Now I come to record, and there we go. So anyway, just holding up Ursula K. Le Guin to support me here. This book deals a lot with the idea that there's this group of people who are sort of either genderless or kind of fit in a position of both genders, or both sexes here. And that is done in a really interesting way, where as a result, the whole structure of society is quite different, because if things are not drawn along sort of sex lines, I guess, what does that mean for societies? I thought that was really interesting. I think something that Larry gave me the heads up on, and something that Gemma Books, I think, found, and I struggled with a bit as well, is it is quite heavy on the world building, particularly quite early into the book. So you do get a lot of this person on this thing, and here's this other concept, but with this thing, and it can be a lot, because at times you're like the Sephorum, it kind of feels a little bit almost like Simlish at some point, you know, like the Florala in the Numina with the flower, and you're like, yes, I think I follow. And that's maybe being uncharitable, because this book does do some really interesting and exciting and beautiful things. I just think it's a bit of heavy world building I'm not used to. I'm kind of a little bit used to books that take place in worlds that I know, as in this world. And as a result, sometimes that's a muscle that I haven't flexed or haven't really ever had to build that much of. I don't read a particularly large amount of fantasy, so world building generally is sort of, it's more just like, oh, okay, we're in this part of London, or like, oh, okay, great, we're in France. It's not like here's an entire new structure of the world that influences how time works and gender and everything else. But all of this rambling aside, I did think this was really interesting, and I'm really glad that Larry slowly and subtly persuaded me. I say persuaded, he literally gave me this copy of the book, so persuaded me to actually go and check it out, because I think I would like to read more fantasy, more science fiction. I'm just always a bit nervous of knowing where to start, because it's not my bread and butter in that sense. I'm using a lot of very weird mixed metaphors today, but roll with it, it's all good. And speaking of world building, here were then two books I read that were in completely different locations to the ones I'm used to generally. Well, one of them's in Peckham, which is not particularly far, but the other one being in Nigeria. So these are both advanced copies of books coming out, that have just come out. So one of them was Vagabonds by Eloghosa Osunde, and this deals with queer people basically being outcasts within society, and particularly within Lagos in Nigeria. And so it's this really quite interesting and sort of fantastical story at times, because you do get aspects of things like spirits entering people's bodies and things like that, which doesn't come up as often in sort of literature I read, and that's really exciting actually to see. And there's something really alive about this book. It's very interesting how the kind of the queer characters who sort of belong almost to this underbelly of society, kind of outcast, not really given some of the same opportunities, how they almost become these sort of figures on the outside who are then able to see things very differently, which is a very, very queer experience actually in many ways, I think. But I thought this was really interesting how it did it and how it approached it. It didn't always work for me. I think I found it a little bit hard to get into at times, but I couldn't sort of deny that overall this book was really interesting. And I think it kind of reminded me a little bit of something like maybe Freshwater by Okechukwu, which I didn't always get on with, but actually, I mean, a lot of Emezi's other work I've really enjoyed. But what I thought was really interesting about this was, that kind of folklore way of approaching a story, of it feels very much like an oral tradition, very much like a tale being told, and it's sort of, there are fates and there are spirits and there are all these other things. So it was really exciting and interesting overall. I just couldn't fully connect to it, but that's probably more a me problem, I think, than anything else. And finally, I read Here Again Now by Okechukwu Nzelu, and this book I thought was really interesting about dealing with a sort of, essentially at the heart of this is a set of queer characters, particularly a couple, and one of them has a really horrible set of things happen to them health-wise, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but there's a real feeling throughout the book, the way that this is told really sensitively and really beautifully, I think, that it almost feels like the stress of trying to conform in the world is sort of physically manifesting in his body. And we're told as well that medically that's not what's happened here, but there is a feeling that those two things are sort of connected. And so we watch sort of in Peckham as these characters sort of navigate loss and fear and sort of family relationships and those sorts of things as well. So I did think it was really, really beautifully told, really nice to sort of focus on. For example, at one point there's a straight father figure who doesn't get it at first and sort of takes a while to kind of accept, his son and his sexuality. And I think the book handles it really interestingly, that it's not just like oh well, you're all fine with it all now. There's a kind of resentment from other characters around it of sort of, why did it take you so long? How could you have, why are you only half accepting now? All of those sorts of things. And I think that felt very well captured. That felt very real to me. Again, didn't always fully work for me necessarily as a book. I mean, I still think like really, really interesting. I would still recommend. I didn't sort of connect enough to it to like fully love it, but it was a really good solid 4 stars. I thought it was really tenderly done, really cleverly done. And I think it's the kind of story that would appeal to quite a lot of people. I think it kind of, that sort of family drama and sort of health drama alongside kind of queer lives, I think was done so beautifully as well. So anyway, those have been the books that I read this week. And again, I realise that looks like a large-ish number, like 7, you know, is like a book a day. But then given that like some of these books are like literally teeny tiny little things, and a couple of, did I read? Yeah, so Claire Keegan's Foster and They by Kay Dick. I did also listen to parts as audiobooks as well. So that also probably sped along the process. Anyway, I've been Bod the Booker, rambling a bit here. Quelle surprise. That's what I've read this week. I hope you've had a great reading week. I hope everything's going well. In amongst the million book prize announcements, I say that, I mean only 2, like the Women's Prize long list and the International Booker long list, but still very, very exciting. So I'm currently in the process of sort of trying to clear through a few books that I've got that are either ARCs, like advanced copies, or other library loans that I've got that I should probably read at some point, and other books that I really want to read for the Republic of Consciousness long list and other prizes. So there's quite a lot going on, but it's also really exciting. There are so many new books coming out in kind of at the moment, like March and April are really, and February really as well, are really busy months for new releases, but also quite a lot of prizes around that whole thing as well. So an exciting, if busy time reading wise. I'm going to clear a bit of backlog and probably in April start properly sitting down and reading most of the International Booker long list. And I'll probably dip into a couple along the way. But yeah, those are some of my plans. Anyway, I've been Bod the Booker. Take care and speak to you all soon. Bye bye.